Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everybody to the March 28th, 2024 meeting of the Fitchburg Historical Commission. I'd like to call this meeting to order now. Please be advised that FATV is conducting an audio and video recording of this meeting for public broadcast. Let's see, we have no guests here at the moment, and we haven't received any information for public comment. And I'd like to introduce those that are on the commission here with me. My name is Keith Chenot. I'm the chair. And also with us is Ellen DiGeronimo, Donald Ostrowski, and Andy Lasty, which gives us a quorum to operate. I'd like to move on to our agenda at this point. Item number 1 was public comment period, and we have none. Number 2, review and approve minutes for the February 29th, 2024 meeting.
I move that we approve the February 29th, 2024 meeting minutes.
Okay, I had one amendment that
I got that.
Brief piece, and
I get that edit.
just a little clarification on item number 7 or 8, I think it was. And so approval as amended. Ellen moved that, and a second.
Second.
Don, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There are none, passed unanimously. Our next item on the agenda was the theater block project update, and our guest speaker had an emergency, is not able to join us on that topic, so we will see if we can cover that at our next meeting in April. Number 4 is an update on the appreciation and preservation of historic stone walls and stone structures. Our commission member, Don Ostrowski, had some questions about an ongoing project or a project that's happening off of View Street. And he's asked, and Dan Quayle has volunteered from the architectural firm that's doing some work there on that to maybe give us an update. And since Dan Quayle, you're here with us, and maybe if you could introduce yourselves and firm's name and your project, that would be great.
Thank you. I called in on the phone. I couldn't get my audio to work through the computer, so I hope you can hear me okay. My name is Dan Quayle. I'm one of the principals at Lincoln Architects, and we've been working with the Applewild School for years now on a variety of different projects. We have 2 projects currently going with them, one for a dormitory, which is further up the hill. But we're here today to talk about the new Athletic and Wellness Center, which is going to be located more on the southerly end of campus adjacent to View Street. So the project involves the removal of the existing gymnasium structure, which was a temporary gym that was built in 1970, yet is still standing, and some other smaller buildings that are connected. There's a small cape with a connected flat roof academic building. We're taking that down and building a new structure, which is larger than what's currently existing. And I think the reason you folks invited us to the meeting was to look at the stone retaining wall that's off of View Street. One of the things that we're doing with this new structure is, because it's a taller building than what's currently existing, we're actually lowering the floor level of the proposed structure quite a bit from the level where that existing stone retaining wall is. It would actually it's preferable that we take the stone retaining wall out. Our landscape architect on the job is looking to repurpose the capstones elsewhere. We have a couple of other design features as a part of the project. There's a small sort of outdoor classroom amphitheater area. We're going to be reusing some of the stone slabs that exist on the campus, as well as some areas where we have some stone bench seating that we're planning on trying to reuse some of the existing granite slabs.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that information. And any questions or?
Well, yeah, we, as kind of background, we have been working, we on the commission have been working for a long time on the demolition delay ordinance and a historic stone wall ordinance. And so this is part of our process of finding out more about what is what the changes that are occurring in Fitchburg. Now that gymnasium, there is a very good argument, I think, for waiving any historic value to that gymnasium because basically it's unsafe. They've been using this gymnasium and it's not only isn't it up to date, but there are potential hazards for the students inside of it. So there's a very, very solid reason for waiving any concern that it's any kind of historical asset or historic value for the history of Fitchburg. As I understand it, this is part of a larger project going all the way, almost down to the new cafeteria that is on Prospect Street. So that the concrete retaining wall, which is on the other side, perpendicular to the stone wall, will, as I understand it, be taken out.
Yeah, that's correct. Right. That retaining wall is not in great shape either, the concrete one you're referring to. That is planned to be taken out. And again, our new floor level is lower than the current existing gymnasium floor level.
There is an existing ordinance in the city which the historical commission does not have purview over in terms of stone walls on streets, or facing streets like U Street, and so our interest isn't in terms of enforcing or not enforcing whatever that existing city ordinance is, but it's more in terms of the possible historic value of this retaining wall. Now, when I contacted the assessor's office, they said that they didn't have any information about when that stone wall was constructed, although that parcel on at Applewild that the gymnasium is on, which is 2-1-0. They said that the only information they have is construction in 1960, although things may have been added after. So you're saying 1970 for the.
I believe, yes, I believe that's when the pre-engineered metal building was installed, late 60s, beginning of early 1970s.
Okay, all right. We kind of assumed that the stone wall was put in about that time, when that started that construction occurred. We don't know for sure. It seems to match that period. Keith is our resident architect, and I think he would concur that it's somewhere in that period, second half of the 20th century. Yeah, third quarter of the 20th century. So the question, the idea is to lower everything, and you said something about it was determined that the retaining wall would not be retained because of the lowering of the grade? Is that right?
Well, yes, I mean, right now, the way the new building lays out, and I have drawings if it's helpful to share them, if I can share my screen. If not, I'll try and explain it. But the new floor level is actually a little bit lower than the top of that retaining wall. So basically, the way the landscape architect has this worked out, the egress out of the end of that corridor is fairly close. It's probably a foot above the street elevation if you came out with a perpendicular sidewalk, which would be somewhat below where the top of the wall is. You know, if it's determined that we should try and keep that wall, if there is historic value, and we'll have to go back to the drawing board a little bit and see if there's another way to route the egress out of that corridor. I mean, it's with any building, you know, in terms of building occupant load, there's a certain amount of required egresses based on the occupant load of a building. So that exit is definitely required per the floor plan layout. It's just a matter of, you know, it would be sort of strange, I think, to have the egress at that point, you know, there's really, it wouldn't be retaining anymore. It would be sort of more of a freestanding wall, if you will, because the grade's being lowered behind it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I agree with Dan a little bit, particularly if the building level is going to be lower and perhaps even an egress that comes out to the street level there. You know, the egress would be coming out below the top of the wall, and they'd have to go back up again and back down over the wall or something as egress. And since the grade, the wall was probably put in originally because they had to raise the grade at that point where the grade was higher to kind of infill to the higher level of the old gymnasium in there. And I think it was, you know, as I had said before, probably since it is the stone is all mortared together and it's smaller kind of rubble field stone, or maybe some of it is quarried or something, but small size stone that's mortared together and finished with a granite cap that Dan mentioned they're hoping to repurpose elsewhere on the campus. And it seems to follow pretty much a design of highway standards, particularly Mass Department of Transportation standards that Fitchburg might have been using when it abuts the property line of a public way, that they use a retaining wall that's a Mass DOT thing. There's huge big retaining walls like that in the town of Holden, which are, you know, 15, 20 feet high. It's kind of the same design with mortared in stones that was done maybe 15 or 20 years ago. Very almost exact same design when they widened the road there, and they were in some deep cuts where they had to retain the spot. So it's not particularly unique to Fitchburg as a stone wall, but a lot of our dry laid stone walls, my personal opinion, anyhow. And I think with Dan's explanation why they're lowering the floor level for probably many design reasons, and that makes the floor level, you know, more at level with the sloping street at the View Street coming down there, and the retaining wall is no longer needed. And I would tend to think that, you know, they would have a better appearance with being able to landscape without retaining that wall as being kind of an obstruction, almost out of place. You know, so long as there are other landscaping pieces that they're doing to the front, you know, it might be the back of the gym, but it is a public way, and how they landscape that and as its presence to the public way is not something we have jurisdiction over, but we appreciate you know, kind of sharing your thoughts on the wall, particularly as we are considering as Don said, a stone wall ordinance where we're trying to preserve characteristics of historical stone walls. And it's our question, what is history? When does history start as far as stone wall construction is? So it's something we all kind of discuss as we look at it.
Now, Dan mentioned that he could show something, it might help to visualize for us
Yeah.
non-architects.
Sure.
If you could share the screen, you could show the,
Yeah, that'd be great. Dan, do you have some sort of elevation or something? you can show us?
I do. I'm trying to get to the right one here.
Sure.
I was kind of wondering if the new building would kind of just sit almost in the same footprint as the old one, or is it gonna expand out a little more too?
Oh, it does expand out. It's going to take me 1 second here, folks, to get it. I've got to connect back in. I had it up, but I must have closed the file down.
one of we mentioned it's not particularly unique to Pittsburgh, but it is kind of unique to the neighborhood. So does that count for anything?
Well, how about the gymnasium itself?
As I pointed out, it is a safety concern.
But
The gymnasium is a safety concern for the students.
yeah.
Let's put it this way, they should not be doing, students
Yeah,
should not be using that shit right now.
true. I can imagine that it was a temporary structure and it's now 70 years old or something, or 60 years old.
So it's gonna be a separate building.
Well, there's expanding down the hill, so this isn't just replacing the same footprint, this is they're going to knock out the concrete wall that's perpendicular to this wall. And then, as I understand, the building below it, which also is outdated, let's say. I guess they could update it or upgrade it, but in this case, I think they decided it would be better to just expand. A new cafeteria was put in 2010, I think, somewhere in there.
That's about right.
And
Can you folks? I was going to ask if you can see the screen now. I hit the screen share and it looks on my end.
We see your folder with documents in it, but we don't see the actual document. Maybe double click on it or. There we go. And now we see it.
Oh,
So if I can try and orient everybody, this is the overall site plan. So Prospect Street is up along the right-hand side. View Street's running along the bottom of the page. Existing dining hall is here. This is what we call the View Street dorm. This is the Anson Academic Building on the back, and then this is the original Crocker House. There was a small annex to the Crocker House that I believe was built in the 60s that's coming down as a part of this. The original gymnasium, the Butler Building, it was approximately right here. Then there was what was sort of their old gym, they called it, which is connected with a flat roof academic building, which is only about 10 feet away from the existing dining hall we built back in 2010. And then there was another, which was all sort of connected into the old white Cape house that's in tough shape as well. Now, the one thing that's a little different here too is obviously with a new building, we need to comply with the zoning setbacks and heights and everything. So the new buildings are actually, the new building, proposed building is actually farther back from View Street than the existing buildings are by quite a bit. And if I can zoom in here, the retaining wall you folks are talking about is it's generally in this area right here. And what the landscape architect is proposing is, as we push these buildings back and we open up this open plaza between the dining hall and the new building, because this ends up being sort of a major access way between the lower school, because the lower school is across View Street, and then most of the upper kids are on the upper side, and everybody shares the same dining hall. They created a terrace with some planting and some benches and seating area. There's quite a bit of landscaping going along that edge. The existing drive up to the Anson Academic Building remains where it is, but basically, we're taking down two to three connected buildings. The gym is freestanding, but then there's the old, what they call the old gym, and the academic wing, which again comes over to about 10 feet away from the existing dining hall. So that kind of gives you an idea of where it is on the site. And these are some of the concept pictures that the landscape architect has put together for how to develop this terrace that's off of U Street. And the other thing we're trying to do is, obviously with young children on a campus, we need to keep them safe. So we're trying to design the grading and everything in a way that there's no sort of hidden places where kids can be out of line of sight from a public way, whether that's, a police car having to drive by or things like that. So there is a little bit of retaining wall in here, but it's basically from street level down to the new lower level. And then if I go a little farther along here, I call up this page here. So this is sort of an aerial view looking down on the campus from above. On the lower right-hand corner, that's the existing dining hall. This is the existing, they call it the View Street dormitory. That's the Anson Academic Building, and then the original Crocker Mansion's there. So again, that retaining wall is generally in this area, but with this new, let me see if it shows up better on the next page. You can't see it behind the trees, but there's there's an egress corridor that comes out along this pathway. So again, this is lowered probably 6 to 8 feet from where the current grade is, because the existing gym floor is up here, and there's a rather steep grade down to the street, and that's partly where that retaining wall is. And then the perpendicular retaining wall you were mentioning is the stone wall, retaining wall is here, and then where the existing gym was, there's that concrete retaining wall that runs perpendicular to View Street. That's actually in tough shape, and it's actually starting to lean towards the other building. So that would have needed to have been addressed one way or the other. And then, as far as repurposing the capstones, because they're fairly large, we're looking at, reusing them as landscape features and sort of, creating kind of an outdoor classroom with some of these larger capstones. The school has some already on campus that are not being utilized right now. We're going to try and repurpose that, and whatever we can salvage off the top of the wall here. The landscape architect is also showing some of these bigger, rough, split granite slabs as sort of bench and seating areas for the kids, maybe during pickup time and whatnot, drop off and pickup time. So gives you an idea of the flavor with these precast benches and planting beds and low walls, what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, right now that concrete wall that's perpendicular to the stone retaining wall is really dangerous. It's very.
It is.
Very.
Yeah, I mean it's not in good shape. It's leaning towards, downhill towards the dining hall. So as a part of this project, again, because we have obviously a bigger building than the three sort of combined buildings that are being taken out, that retaining wall goes away. The existing concrete retaining wall goes away. And again, it would help if we don't have to maintain the stone part of the wall that's in here because of this, where this egress door is coming out of the building. This is only about a foot above contour 662. So there's a gentle slope from this new sidewalk down towards View Street. So having that wall there would, I think, create an issue. It would create a visual barrier potentially. It's really not a retaining wall. That retaining wall isn't really needed at that point with the recontouring.
Yeah, but I'm also thinking that the concrete wall is very easy to gain access to walk along the top of it, but it's a high wall, and kids could easily fall.
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. In theory, anything over a 30-inch vertical change in elevation should have a guardrail on it. And that one doesn't.
There was no guardrail.
No, I
Okay.
know. It's not, yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
But that was it.
I wanted to ask, now, the access from View Street, would that be a drop-off?
Well, that's one of the things that we're about to submit to the planning board for site plan review. That's one of the things that we had about earlier in the month. We had a meeting with the Economic Development Task Force, and one of the concerns that's always raised on an academic site is parking. And so on. So I don't have the overall aerial of the campus. The main driveway loop is here. Their upper campus is towards the top of the page. They're building a new dormitory there right now. Across the street, they have the field hockey field, and then where my cursor is here on the other side of U Street is the lower school. So we've got students coming from sort of up the hill and down the hill to the dining hall. We're looking to expand parking in this loop to gain some additional, and then potentially a drop-off area and off of U Street where they can come back down Bond Street, which runs perpendicular into View Street. But I think that the overall main traffic flow would remain as their current patterns are, not during construction, but after, post-construction, where it's basically a one-way loop through this big arcing driveway loop, where students in the morning that don't take a bus or drop off by family members, they're getting dropped off here, and then they're exiting back out onto Prospect Street.
Yeah, when they were using the building below the present gym, between the gym and the cafeteria, they were using that building for a daycare center, and it was problematic. Parents dropping off their kids on View Street.
Yeah, we've heard that. The other thing we did maybe a month earlier in the month too is we had a neighborhood meeting with some of the the local abutters, immediate abutters to the property, and we've heard loud and clear that the parking on View Street is an issue for a couple of reasons. One, it's not a very wide street. There's a significant amount of erosion that's happened on mostly on the southern side of that, but on the northern side there's an old sort of drainage. It's almost like a culvert of stone. Now, the city is in the process of redoing the water and sewer in this neighborhood. They did some of the work last year, and talking with DPW, they're working their way from the top of View Street down to about the intersection of Bond Street this year. And then next year, I believe they're going to try and continue and finish isolating the stormwater sewer from the sanitary sewer and improve, obviously with new roadways, curbing, and drainage, so everything functions better than it currently does. And, so that deep erosion would be obviously solved with their new structures and everything. But the other thing the school has done after that initial meeting is they've required all of their potential, the staff members that live in the View Street dorm, they're not allowed to, they don't want anybody parking on the street anymore.
Right.
So the school is going to do what they can to enforce keeping any of their people off the street. And that was the other idea with, if it was like a late afternoon pickup after school hours, if the students staying after for a club activity or something, they might not necessarily have to go through the main loop. They potentially have a quick drop-off area here, and they can go back out down Bond Street and back to Prospect and out.
So the present gym doesn't have an egress to View Street, but it's thought it's a good idea to have an egress to View Street in the new gymnasium.
Yeah, the main entry to the existing gym is primarily from the upper level. I believe there's one egress door in this far corner. But because of the way our new layout is here, we've got the gymnasium here, there are squash courts here, and there's a corridor that connects and links in between those two. And because of the occupant loads, we can't have dead end quarters. We're required to have an access point here. I don't think it's going to be a terribly busy use from a school's point of view, but it's there more because we need it to meet the building codes.
Okay. Well, thank you, that's very informative.
Investment.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank you.
coming to, this meeting, taking your time out to come to this meeting.
No problem. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
But thank you, Dan. We appreciate your volunteering to give us an update on it, and good luck with the planning board and the rest of the city. Looks
Thank
like
you.
Good work.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys. Have a good day.
All right,
Thank you.
Bye. That looks like a pretty big investment.
Huge. Amy, who's the headmistress, has a vision.
Oh,
And, people in the neighborhood are not on board with that vision.
oh,
I think they understand why she's doing what she's doing. Basically, she's bringing in, she's expanding the, ability of the, Applewhite to house non-junior students, that is resident
yeah,
students,
residents,
like from other countries.
Yeah.
Um,
which is wonderful.
it is, but it requires quite a bit of change. The new, what you, Dan alluded to, the new dormitory, back at the present, Applewhite.
The
And,
big building.
yeah, be
But
further up, in the woods, basically, well, those woods are gone.
Okay. Oh, I see.
To make room for this new dormitory. And, so.
Years.
Quite a change.
here's a street view again from, this is just Google Earth, probably a couple years ago, but so this is where, maybe this is the dining room?
No,
This is not the dining room.
That building's fine.
Okay, so maybe this is the back.
That's going, that's where the old daycare center was. So
Okay.
when I mentioned that people would drop off their kids, that little space there, and it just, it wasn't a lot of traffic, but it was just,
No. Is a new dining hall not in this picture?
not in,
Okay,
further,
so this is,
further down.
yeah, okay.
This is View Street a little bit?
Yeah.
So this-
Just used to
this-
going up toward Vaughn.
This is that, the stone retaining wall.
Right, right.
This is the old gymnasium, which is referred to as a Butler building or prefab building.
Right.
This is the pavement, and this is kind of that gravel, riprap, drainage piece that's in here. And what, from his plan, they were showing, obviously, they're not gonna change the street elevation, but they're intending to put there is this egress above here somewhere.
Yeah. No, it
And that's
makes,
the old leaning wall.
yeah, that concrete wall is really bad news.
So they're planning on putting sidewalk in here then also. So that people can walk on this instead of in the gravel here and in the street.
And the way they, as I saw the design of the new building, it makes sense given the downward grade from Bond to Prospect. Rather than the way it's done now, so.
There might even be a little depression down in this area here.
Yes,
In one model, which ends up there. Okay, that was great that they did.
but I'm glad to hear that they're planning to repurpose those granites.
That was good to hear. Some of those.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
on the program.
I will take it upon myself to ask from time to time how that's coming along.
Yeah, been using them in that amphitheater spot that they were showing.
Yeah, it
Farther
sounds
up,
nice.
beyond the Crocker building, by the Crocker building was, for outside,
See,
classes and presentations and things like that, which would be great. And quite often these, sometimes they come with a rough top and a smooth bottom on it, so we can fill it in. Maybe for some seating or other spots, so.
Yeah, I hate to see the retaining wall go because it has been part of the neighborhood, but.
Yeah.
It,
I think the landscape, with the amphitheater and things and using rock, kind of native rock or granite slabs and things like that, might even give more presence of, Fitchburg's identity with lots of rocks and quarry types of slabs and things that might be, if those landscape plans come to fruition, might be even a better representation, or certainly a different way of representing the stone culture of Fitchburg.
one thing I didn't ask them about, which is something that also is irksome to people in the neighborhood, is that chain link fence.
Oh,
That
yeah.
you're doing now, it goes all the way.
This,
It goes almost all the way down to Prospect, and then it goes down Bond Street all the way.
Oh,
And it is just an eyesore. I mean, it's an old, well, chain link fences themselves are not beautiful, but this is an old chain link fence and it's falling apart. And it's really an eyesore.
is it pretty good drop off on part of this along Bond Street?
Drop off? Yeah.
Oh, they're
It's down.
probably, he was saying that lower,
No, they're leaving it up.
yeah.
oh,
I didn't ask him about that because that's not what we were discussing,
Uh-huh.
but there must be an alternative, a relatively uncostly alternative to an old rusty falling down chain link fence.
Yeah.
well,
This
especially
is
when
what,
they're,
it looks like they have some iron fencing or steel picket fencing down in this lower section here.
Yeah, something like that is more attractive.
This must be the lower school area.
Yeah, the lower school, that's the lower school. And there's parking at the lower school. But as he was mentioning, see, people come up Bond Street, it's almost a blind, intersection. You drive up Bond Street and View Street comes down this way, so you're looking for cars coming down View, but also looking for cars coming up View as you're trying to make the turn.
oh, sure,
So
I.
you have to be looking three different ways at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Fortunately, there's not electric. But it still is problematic. Michael, who has the corner house at, Bond and View, has complained to me about trucks coming around, up View, turning left on Bond and driving onto his gravel.
Uh-huh.
And a Zen garden in front, driving onto that
Oh,
Zen garden, because it's a sharp turn.
I know, yeah, I haven't been on Pond Street for years, but I do remember.
And then the people, the house parents were parking on View Street, right
At the corner,
well, just a little bit down from the corner. So as you're looking up, you're making the turn and their car is right there. So if you're not careful.
Yeah.
So I was glad to hear that there are, but I hope they provide, there is space further up toward the old, behind the main profit building, that other building, there is space up there, right up there. They could park up there. And I think they have, but it's not a dedicated space. That's the problem. If they had a dedicated space, it would be all set.
yeah. Well, in some ways, it's great that the activity is there. Better than not, but being able to manage it, et cetera. And I'm sure that when the zoning board looks at it, I'm sure the planning board looks at the site plan.
I kind of think that the building with the turret
Yes,
I think that was on a house tour once.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
lovely.
the Casey's, or the Casey's.
The Casey's, yeah.
I've been in that
Yeah.
bunch of persons.
That's a dead end street, isn't it, view?
Yeah, that's,
Well, technically, yes, but then it turns into something I call Buena Vista driveway. It's a continuation of you going around in a horseshoe curve. And it is actually,
Maybe beyond Bond Street? Oh,
it comes out at Bond Street, lower down on Bond.
uh-huh,
But it's a driveway to the old camp house, which is across from where the Hellmans live.
oh, sure, oh,
They're
yeah,
just all part of their property
Yes,
complex. And, Marjorie Kent, lived there until fairly recently.
Uh-huh.
She died. And the guy who bought the house is now responsible for maintaining this very long, it's at least, 120 yards long,
oh,
140 yards long. That he has to maintain, he has to pay to have it plowed and repaired.
it's
So
a-
it's
it's not
a
accepted,
very long driveway,
it's not accepted as a part of the street or something.
but delivery trucks use it to get not just to Kemp's house, but to other houses as well. The garbage trucks go up there, so they use it as a street.
Then there should be a city council representing that ward that should work with them. Work with the neighbors and work with the man who lives. Where this all happens.
Yeah, well, nobody objects to it because it's, you know, it's one of those odd things. The next, along our property, actually on our property, is something called the Old Road, which is not a road per se, it's just a dirt path, basically. But we have to keep it clear just for the purpose of someone possibly needing to use it. And a few years ago, someone did need to use it. They couldn't get to their house because a mark truck had driven off the road on Haskell Street right above some propane tanks. So the whole road was closed
Oh,
off.
my goodness.
She couldn't get up Haskell, she couldn't get to her house. So I directed her down the old road
Uh-huh.
to get
yeah, that was great for, Applewild and their architect to be able to share with us, and,
It was,
we appreciate that, and
we do.
If we can, I'd like to move on to item number 5, which is activities for the May Preservation Month activities, and the brochure release for the downtown historic districts and areas brochure that we're creating. So just Ellen and I have been meeting monthly for the last 2 months with the mayor, community development and economic development, along with the Historical Society and in town to help get kind of this group effort of having some activities happening for preservation during Preservation Month, which is a month. May is recognized by the National Trust, National Park Service, et cetera, as being Preservation Month. And from Ellen's suggestion, it's been not happening for a long time, and we thought it would be appropriate for this year to create an activity about preservation in Fitchburg. And we've selected May 23rd as the date of the kind of a main event, which is a Thursday and probably about 4 to 5 p.m. And we'll have coverage from FATV. We'll be in the legislative building next door to the city hall here. At that presentation, we're working to create a kind of a brief program, one celebrating all the projects and things that have happened in Fitchburg, where we some great preservation has happened and is ongoing as we speak, and to talk about briefly talk about the advantages of having historic preservation in our communities and in Fitchburg in particular. The benefits to the citizenry as a whole, and maybe mentioning some other communities where it has done great things to help re-cement the activities and the Main Street and downtown culture that certainly Fitchburg had, and we're thinking of kind of the rejuvenation of Fitchburg. Which has been a goal of the city for decades now, but kind of recognizing how preservation helps in that effort. And obviously, that's why the Historical Commission is here, and let's help broadcast that to the public and help celebrate that. So, one of the things we're doing is hoping to have maybe a PowerPoint presentation with showing facades, particularly of buildings that are in our Main Street area. And there's a kind of a handout I gave to Andy there, get an inventory of some of the buildings we're selecting. And some of it is just kind of recognizing projects that have happened over the last several years that we haven't had a chance to really talk about. We're recognized as part of this major effort that the city's been going through. And all the way up through some of the recent ones and some of the ongoing ones, such as the Academy Street School projects and the artist housing, which is again preservation of the B.F. Brown School and the Academy building, and the City Steeple building into multiple artist housing.
Maybe, I just had a thought. Maybe Mark could make a presentation. So we
Sure, yeah.
Want me to come?
Let's talk about it.
Okay.
Monday's meeting. We're going to be meeting again on
Oh,
Monday
that's right.
in the North Meeting Room
Yeah.
upstairs. Ellen and I and any of the other commission members are certainly welcome to come.
It's a
With this kind of extended group, it includes the mayor and other city departments, Historical Society, and in town. Historical Societies has volunteered their graphics designer to help make a poster to kind of advertise this event. So we hope to have that out maybe in a few weeks. And looking for one of the other thoughts and we've put this out to city council members to, along with our kind of recognition of downtown buildings, if each of the ward councilors in the various wards throughout the city could perhaps have their local ward residents nominate their favorite preservation or preserved projects in each of their wards to come forward with maybe a photograph and maybe recognition of the owners of that particular property, or maybe a brief history on that. So besides Main Street, which is kind of obvious to our business district and kind of major push in getting more housing downtown and commuter rail housing, et cetera, is certainly the preservation that's happened throughout the throughout the city, including all the other major villages and neighborhoods and residential stock that we have, and the people that have tirelessly worked on maintaining the quality of their older buildings and which we have. So Pittsburgh has this great heritage, and we're just hoping to make it as a highlight during the month
Reintroducing it to
at this event.
others.
Yeah.
Is there room there for mentioning reservation projects that need to be done?
The encouragement of that is really our basic intent is the encouragement of more maintenance of what has been done, but an encouragement of more of that.
Celebrating what has been done, but also
Encouraging it, one, talking about the resources available, how do you preserve the building? Are there rules, are there resources that one could go to find out, my siding is going, or my shingle roof or slate roof is going, what are some different ways of doing it? And are there, designers and crafts people out there that really know how to do these things, particularly for older buildings? And kind of follow up on some of the other things, but there are resources out there, and there certainly with like Preservation Briefs, which is National Park Service online database, and preservation knowledge of how to, if you have a question about old brickwork, old stonework, or repointing masonry, or revitalizing old siding or things like that. There are great guidelines for people that, oh, there's how you do this. And also Massachusetts, Preservation Massachusetts has a directory of craftspeople, consultants, contractors, preservation architects and designers that, do want old windows restored, doorways restored, lead paint removal, great antique decorations or bric-a-brac in your house, etc. What are best ways of doing that? And there are lots of craftspeople here in our Commonwealth and community here that do things like that. So like you say, would like to do that, but how do I do it? And just kind of be able to mention publicly the resources available.
So we shouldn't mention specific projects that really cry out for immediate attention.
Sure.
Would that ruffle any feathers?
I would be, I think if everybody owns a property and they have their own reasons for how they maintain them and what the uses can be, and there certainly are economic issues and lots of pieces of this.
I'd love to see you.
Yeah. I think maybe in a different venue, my personal thought on that, but
I'm thinking in particular the School Street School, which is.
Andy was just mentioning the School Street School is a kind of forgotten, a little bit off the beaten path of the Main Street, but not far.
But it is part of the historic district.
It's part of the proposed Upper Common Historic District.
And
Which would mean that if it does become a historic district, it would be eligible for
Historic tax credits.
for tax credit funding.
do you think that's what they're waiting for before doing anything?
I haven't talked with them. I have no idea.
Do you know who owns it now? Or does the city still own
I
it?
think the city still owns it.
Yeah.
I don't think they sold.
Well, I don't know how we could facilitate this, but, they're working on their historic district. And perhaps we could have a meeting with them about school and get around to suggesting that a proposal could go out seeking developers for it.
Mhm.
It's an interesting school.
Oh, yeah.
I remember going there to visit the superintendent used to be there, and I liked the inside of the building for some reason, but I can't remember now. Maybe we could have a tour.
Yeah, it is, the School Street School was designed by H.M. Francis. It has similar features to the previously Faith Congregational Church on Old Stone and Main Street. It's kind of a Richardsonian revival with its arches and brownstone and a lot of it's, it really built on a hillside and how it was designed with its kind of central entry and its stairways to moving up into the school multiple levels, as some of it buried in the northern part of the hillside and certainly.
I think it's very interesting.
Yes, it's a wonderful piece of architecture. And part of the thought of this event is making people aware of what the preserving the visual qualities of a lot of this architecture and historic heritage of these and things that can't be duplicated today, and also the possible funding, financial resources that might be available to them for helping to do preservation types of projects. Not all of them will be eligible for it, but particularly if there are property owners such as that particular property and kind of the rest of the area, all of the property owners that buildings that, currently maybe not being used highly or very little, and obviously not creating any income to kind of help with maintenance and things, being able to repurpose them and being able to know that there are resources through community development and economic development has some access to grants and funding. There's some state agency, perhaps some federal agency funding for certain types of things. And that there are also tax credits for, existing buildings that aren't even historic. You can get a 10% tax credit on just work in a non-historic building. The state has a 20% tax credit for historic buildings, eligible historic buildings, which particularly if they are included in a historic National Register district, they would certainly be eligible, or more than likely be eligible. Then there are additional 20% federal tax credits for these types of historic structures. Examples of that are the Moran Square apartment complex. It was done a year or so ago and is certainly getting into occupancy now. That was a tax credit, partially funded and making it possible with the old Brown Bag Filling Company building or Starbucks Furniture, or Harper's Furniture most recently. And the old fire station and the infill and all of that construction, because it was in the Moran Square Historic District, was eligible for the income tax credits. One of our first properties in the city that took advantage of that is the Safety Fund building, which New View has its headquarters in, and its multifamily housing on the upper floors of that particular building, where they were able to use tax credits for that.
They were the first ones to use that ordinance that we passed, hoping that the last month that I was on the council, which I don't know if it, I think the 80s, we rezoned this entire Main Street. So I don't know if we went to the west, towards the west, but all the upper stories can be used for residential use. And and Mark was the first, New View was the first, anyone, whoever did anything. So we had hoped that the city would advertise that, but it never happened, so. But it could still happen.
Fitchburg has a lot of amenities to it, including the commuter rail. And that here it connects to the east, and it's not more and more, we, at least I see in the news coverage of, housing crises here and housing crises there, that, Fitchburg is certainly an affordable community. And people that own properties in our city, can certainly take advantage of our location on the commuter rail. And certainly the heritage of Fitchburg and the beautiful architecture we still have in both its commercial stop downtown and throughout our neighborhoods all over the city. There's great stock of historic resources in our community. And
Yeah, that's what we've been saying. We moved here 16 and a half years ago. We were saying that 16 and a half years ago, ever since.
and it's this is one opportunity to kind of talk about it publicly and celebrate it along with the mayor, other city offices, Historical Society, our commission.
We are fixed up
Help make an event.
all of the night.
Again, bring preservation as a public dialogue, and the more we can do that, the more people are going to be might understand it and take advantage of some of the great assets the city has. So, getting back to the event or multiple events, getting the word out for people to maybe watch it or see it and start talking about our resources, being able to just identify, different kinds of architecture.
That's important.
And being able to say, well, this was happening in the post-Civil War, or this building was built before the Civil War, but after the War of 1812, and what was happening in our country at that time, what was happening in Fitchburg at that time, and kind of recognizing certainly the uniqueness of the city. It is a river city. It is a highly hilly city, and still have some cobblestone streets and some of those really steep types of streets.
And it has a very interesting, diverse ethnic.
And a very diverse, continually diverse ethnic background to it. And being able to celebrate that, contribution.
Working class city, it's a working class city. And,
Yes, yeah.
That should be noted and highlighted.
Yeah.
Now, I don't understand why more people from Boston and don't see value,
But
don't see the value of, the housing is very expensive
yeah, it's unaffordable. People stand.
and Newton and all those. And the commuter rail is much better
Yeah.
than it was.
Yeah.
They have a regular schedule that can be remembered, not these odd times. And they've been running the trains because of the new Wachusett station. Because before it was the Wachusett station, the train that was late coming out was the one that had to turn around and be late going in. But
Exactly.
now they can send another train while the late one makes its way to Wachusett Station.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the trains remain on time.
Well, that's wonderful, because I
Even
used
if
to
one of the
commute by train
trains,
for 10
even if
years.
one of the trains is late, the train schedule remains on schedule.
Yeah. And that's, further on in our agenda is talking about vacancies we have and having someone from the real estate industry involved with our commission would be great. And adding that perspective.
A minority woman would be very nice.
All of
For diversity's sake.
Sure, yes, indeed.
Who put this document together, Keith?
Pardon?
Who put this document together?
That's my,
That's yours?
yeah. Right now, this piece is just kind of looking at the downtown area, from basically Warren Square to, actually, it's added some pieces in going out into River Street and maybe the Ivor Johnson piece. But obviously the yarn mill just on Main Street extension is a recent reservation project where it's turned into mobile housing units very close to downtown also. So we see it and we kind of forget about it. But this is an opportunity to.
Remember the woman who said to you, Fitchburg doesn't have a history? Yeah, and
That was the city council.
it's because no one has been telling them what the history is.
So
Well, some people have tried.
Some people have tried.
No, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I used to, I had as a matter of fact, I just reminded myself I was gonna bring it and see if we could borrow what do you call it? So we could show the carousel, so you could see what it was.
Slides? We don't have slides.
Huh?
Slides?
Yeah, slides. It's a slide carousel.
Slide projector?
A
Slide.
projector, thank you. I lose words. But I used to
That's
go,
so 20th century.
I used to go to any audience. When I think about it, my husband must have been, he had to have been the most patient person in the world, but I would go through spurts where I just felt, well, we've got to do something. So I developed this carousel. And I went, any group, even if it was 4 or 5 people in a house, as long as they had a projector, I would show the picture.
So have you thought of digitizing those slides?
Oh, I'll bring it the next time. I just wrote a note to myself.
Okay,
You can look at them.
because that would reach a wider audience if they were digitized.
Yeah, well, I'll bring it so you can see.
Okay.
I don't know much about doing anything like that, but,
I did that for my classes because I used to show slides and
Uh-huh.
carousel.
The thing that bothered me the most was that people who I felt could make a difference didn't, you know what I mean?
Right,
And
yes,
I even used to take it to classrooms
so distressing, so
in costume.
disappointing. Not distressing so much, disappointing.
Hmm?
It's
It
disappointing,
is disappointing.
yeah.
No, I was, the mayor, Headley Bray, I read in the paper one day that he appointed me to be friend of the vice city for 2 years, but he hadn't called. So,
Why should he?
well, anyway, so I called and made an appointment to see him. And, well, he said, you do parades and things. This isn't, this is just a bigger parade or some such thing, but it was 2 years. And, what I decided to do was to celebrate all the green spaces, Main Street. So we had an event at the Upper Common, we had something at Monument Park. Maybe some other place, I can't think off the street, but we celebrated Main Street. And the reason I did it was, again, hoping that people would come and, you know, look around. I thought it was a great time to do that.
Yeah, you know, it's important when people, move in to a town or a community to find out something about their town. I mean, because that, it becomes part of their heritage.
Right.
Even if they hadn't lived here, that's the way I feel. So my grandparents came from Poland in the late 19th century. So anything of US history, you know, with my family had nothing to do with, but it is incumbent to learn about that history because it becomes part of your, once you move into a community, that the history of that community, the heritage of that community becomes yours.
Right. I decided this year, I'm not gonna pay attention to anything they suggest they'd like. I'm giving them all the city and the river and around the world in Pittsburgh.
There you go.
You know, I've offered them to borrow mine or whatever they wanted to do, but,
Free gift.
and I also sold real estate at one time, and I did have, I worked for Mary McManus, her husband was the principal of the B.F. Brown School, and she, as like myself, really loved Fitchburg. And we had a hard time getting people to look at property in Fitchburg,
Yes.
you know.
Right. Well, I told you, Brent said, I don't care where we live as long as it's not Fitchburg.
Oh, I don't think you told me that, but
Yes.
a lot of, I mean.
And that's where we wound up living.
Just got a paperback booklet, The Golden Years of Fitchburg. I think the city councilors should read that book. It covers the late 1800s to early
Yeah,
1900s,
I wonder if
the industrial.
I have that somewhere.
Fitchburg.
The golden years of Fitchburg.
Yeah, you can get them at the society.
I think the golden years are ahead.
Yeah.
No, but even if,
Of
when
course, yeah.
Mrs. Barbara Crocker hired Mrs. Kirkpatrick to write The City and the River and Around the World in Fitchburg, I reread them every so many years, and it's thrilling.
Yeah,
I mean, the contribution that all the different ethnic groups brought, oh my God.
yeah.
Right.
All right, so that's Preservation Month activities and,
We have a meeting Monday.
we have a meeting Monday at 1 p.m. in the North Meeting Room. Any suggestions or anticipation you guys have, think about it. How we can make this, it probably, there can be other activities in May that, like there could be some walking tours or things like that, if anybody was, can they help organize those beyond it? This main event is, hopefully we can keep it to about an hour long. We don't want to go too long. We want to get the high points of Fitchburg and the value and ways of kind of celebrating what's been done and how we can do more.
Yeah, these events are very important because I remember shortly after we moved to Fitchburg, I went to talk at the library in Regent Francis, and it was an eye opener for me. Always remember.
Yeah, so there's many things like that. And we'll be releasing our formal release of the brochure, the Downtown Historic Areas brochure at that time. And that seems to be, I think we have lots of edits and we're ready to kind of do the final version of it. So, that should all kind of come together by then. And I talked with Pete Caponegli, who does the rock walk and ask him to, you know, if he has a May rock walk event, you know, if we'd like to kind of tie it in, and he could mention May as Preservation Month and that, and
Oh, that would be nice.
he got back saying, yes, they have one 2 days after our presentation, the 23rd, so Saturday, the 25th, there is a rock walk. It started sometime in the morning, I think, and not sure. And everybody meets out by the boulder at Upper Common, and they take off there.
The Boulder or the Boulder Cafe? Boulder Bar.
Boulder.
The bowl,
Boulder.
have you gone on it? Have you gone on it?
No.
And Peter said it'd be great if there could be commission members that could go on any of these rock walks, one, two.
Yeah.
And, you know, kind of add to, because the walk across the Rollstone Bridge and up past the Swedish, or excuse me, the Finnish meeting hall there, it's just up on the right. On your left, that's the building that's missing its columns on Kimball Street. That was a house moved
Handsome.
from Lunenburg, and it used to be the home of H.M. Francis, lived there for a while. Later became a gas station, store, et cetera, with housing up above.
That's
We're
clear.
walking up between there, and then just before we take the path up the hill there, is the Swedish Congregational Church on Rollstone Street, on the uphill climb there, the little white church. And that's an H.M. Francis designed church for this. It was originally a Swedish Congregational Church, and the Finnish Congregational Church is over on Elm Street, but being able to.
Originally, the little church, the pretty little church, that was the German church.
German, you're correct, correct.
And then, church right around the corner from Main Street was the Swedish one.
That's right.
And,
Yep.
Elm Street was the Finnish.
So in the Swedish and Finnish churches, did they have the service in their native language like they did at the German church?
I'm not sure.
The one on Ridge Road had Finnish services.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's,
Yeah.
Finnish Lutheran Church.
I don't know
I've
what
been to services there.
Finnish is. Anyhow, it's where, the Rock Walk is certainly part of, the heritage that, Pete and Ann have been pushing for quite a while and puts lots of effort into. And, you know, the whole history of the quarry and the results of the much quarried stone in our community is certainly a part of our rich heritage we have visually and,
It's a good historical tour.
yes,
Pete Cavadaglia will give you a lot of historical information.
yes, have you done it, Andy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Let me move on to number 6 is a project to document and share Main Street building histories and historic districts, tax credits and other things. This is something that Ellen has been working on for a while, and I asked Andy to kind of help out in his perhaps in his time at the Historical Society, where he volunteers there to maybe coming up with a going to be on this kind of quick celebration, but having a database for a lot of the, you know, starting with downtown buildings, and particularly ones with some historic history to them, being able to share in kind of one-stop shopping. If I were an owner of X number Main Street or just off of Main Street, and you know it's an older building, you know, what, you know, if I'm a real estate agent or an owner of the building, you know, how do I get access to this? And if we could have a quick database that people could find out, you know, what this building looked like before, who owned it, what's the history behind it, and, you know, the value of kind of understanding these little pieces of heritage, doing a lot to, I know when I found out about the house that I lived in and who owned it before and who built it, you know, it just gives you a sense of place and a sense of pride and, in some ways, a sense of responsibility of how to kind of maintain it and, continue, that piece of heritage and adding to that heritage with our own stewardship, if you will, to the properties that we have. We just own things for a while and they're no longer, you know. So kind of, you know, the way we leave our mark in some ways in our short duration of property ownership, is in some ways is a responsibility. And
The principle, leave this place like you would have liked to have found it.
yes, yeah, and it's, you know, there's always challenges and, you know, that happen and hopefully we as a commission and the city, you know, is finding ways to connect people. And finding out some of these resources and sharing information about histories and how to find out history about your buildings. It's a fun way of doing that.
Is this tying into Preservation Month or this separate?
The database is kind of an ongoing thing. It would be nice to kind of announce that we're making some progress on that, maybe at the Preservation Month activity. Depending on time and effort that can kind of go into that, but feel free to give us an update on it sometime and questions of how it might go. Number 7, update on Monument Park repairs. The head of DPW and Parks Commission weren't able to make it to our meeting today. We're kind of an update on those repairs. Nick Erickson did acknowledge that, you know, these are important things, and that kind of highlighting those, it's also a budget issue, and the city is, as usual, but maybe a little bit more than usual right now, is strapped for kind of free spending on things beyond kind of school, et cetera, at the moment. But documenting that to perhaps to the mayor as an official letter, kind of talking about the projects that we are recommending for preservation work at Monument Park in particular. That would be a way of kind of officially making a note of a budgetary item for now and obviously future. James from the Parks Division hopes to be able to make it to our next meeting in April. Sure. And hopefully give us an
update.
An update on that and maybe some suggestions of how we could do that. But in the meantime, I think Nick responded to everybody. You probably got a copy of his email this morning. But I think it might be good if we draft a letter to the mayor, kind of, instead of speaking about it informally, make an official shopping list in a formal way. And obviously the mayor is certainly concerned with budgetary issues of the city and being able to make sure that this particular preservation piece is on the list, if you will, of you know, acknowledged as a piece, a very important piece to get in. So,
yeah, and if nothing is said, then it's very easy to, for those in positions of power who have a lot of demands on the budget and their attention and so forth, it's easy for them not to be aware. Or if they were aware,
Yeah,
to kind of.
and, running a city government is not easy business. There are so many,
Needs.
needs and requirements from, sewer lines and water lines to potholes and curb cuts and, school budgets, which are huge, and kind of all of the things we have. And, our city at the moment is not a rich city, and it doesn't have lots of operating capital to work with. What I would like to offer, I could draft a letter that I could share to everybody and
Sure.
get multiple input on it. And maybe we could have it sent out in a couple of weeks, so if it's,
Great.
I could start a draft on that. And ask for your input.
What about the Armory building? You had emailed us regarding checking repairs there too.
Yes.
That'll be a separate kind of funding item.
That is, kind of a brief history on that. The mayor, after I sent an initial letter to the Armory, just kind of a visual notice that a lot of the exterior masonry was in need. And the mayor got back to me with, kind of a background of what had happened. And, back in, roughly a quick history on it, back in 2009, there was an architectural firm hired to kind of do an overview of kind of the condition of the Armory. And that's when it was being converted to the senior center. I believe it had been vacant somewhat before that. And they came up with a full report that included masonry work, roof work, insulation, redoing some code issues with egress and handicap ramps and et cetera. And, heating systems and, fresh air and all of the things that could be required for a senior center. And some of those things were done. But most recently there was because there were still a lot of pieces and there was a lot of deterioration happening on the exterior and things. There was in 2022, there was a request for proposals sent out, or a request for qualifications sent out for, this was 2 years ago, for a professional designer architect to, make proposals for doing the design work for the masonry work and the insulation work. I believe some of the interior egress work and maybe HVAC system work also. That request for proposal, they did get responses. They did have a firm that they were starting to negotiate with for a contract. And the negotiations fell through, and no one was hired at that. For to come up with the classifications for that building outfit. So it was kind of dropped at that time. Since then, there hasn't been anything done, and the RFP has not been, for budgetary reasons or whatever, has not been reissued. So the mayor is now aware of this. It's been on, the new mayor has been brought up to date on this. And the mayor and I, along with the executive director of the Armory, took a tour a week and a half ago. And we observed kind of all of these things that were at issue, kind of certainly gone beyond, where it was 2 years ago. And still a lot of masonry deterioration, and kind of for us, and being part of the Monument Park Local Historic District, the exterior is certainly an important purview of ours, and the interior. It's a very important building for the interior halls and so forth too. But we took a quick look at it. The things are still there. The mayor is aware of this. She's aware of the need to, have new, call for, design specs being created for this and bidding specs to be, created from that. And again, it's a budgetary issue, I'm sure. Again, we literally talked about it in our half long look through the building. We could again follow up with a letter just kind of reinforcing that from the commission standpoint that we would certainly recommend.
That would be a good idea.
I'll send those out for, review. Good question.
The fourth building in the city.
Yeah, and in the process, I gave the new director a copy of the monument or local historic district design guidelines, just so, city property owners don't particularly know, particularly when a new administrator comes in, this kind of, this ordinance of 1875 kind of affects their buildings like the library. And in the future, the courthouse. The buildings. Monument park repairs, we talked about that and drafting the letter on that, the armory. Number 8, update on historic building demolition delay.
Well, I, with some, hesitation, but Ren urged me to do it. I wrote up a draft of what I've been struggling with in terms of what is considered, what a definition of historical is. Because it affects the demolition delay, because historical, well, for one thing, it pointed out an arbitrary rolling date of 50 years ago is, it's something specific, but it's not meaningful. Why not 51 years? Why not 49 years? Why not 75 years? It's kind of picked out of the air. 50 is kind of round number, could be 100. But for me as a historian, historical, and by the dictionary definition, anything that is not the present is historical,
Yeah.
except for the future. So, and that begins because the present is a moving thing. Not to get too philosophical, but it doesn't affect how I'm thinking about the demolition delay. A nanosecond after the present, when this goes up on FATV, this will be the past already. So it's not 50 years old. It'll be only a few hours old. So how do we define historical? I mean, we're a historical commission. How do we define historical in any consistent, meaningful way?
I never thought about that.
Good. Well, and that is, as yourself as a historian, that's something that, history is written by whoever wrote it. Or history becomes by something, whoever records it in some ways, and somebody else recording the history. I'm reading an interesting book on the rediscovery of America, which is kind of adding the indigenous people of all the people that lived here in America, American countries, colonies, continents, if you will. Obviously, they're the history of America, and we tend to look at it from European colonial times kind of forward, and that's the history of it. That being said, getting back to your arguments of how do we define historic structures in our city, what makes it historic? And that is, our purview in some ways. And the state has created, general laws and things saying that there is a purview of a historical commission. Communities can have historical commissions that can have these, if voted on by the city council, can have these particular
District.
rulings available to them, I guess, for being able to designate, being it at a local level. So I don't know, it's an interesting question. In some ways, the authority is granted through state regulation and whatever this, general laws and regulations to be allowed for communities to do that. Pittsburgh has done that in creating a historical commission and also a local historic district. So, and each community in the Commonwealth does define those that has things like a historic preservation ordinance or demolition delay ordinance. How do we define that? It's not something that we say we can't define it though. So how do we do the best we can? It's not answering your problem, your question, but using a list is better than nothing, I guess. And how to turn it around besides just being a question of, how do we determine things, but where do we set the line that is appropriate? And just for the record, demolition delay is not a prohibition of demolition. It is only a delay period before the owner has the right to demolish, which we're not taking that right away. It is just for certain historic assets in Pittsburgh community is a ordinance like this. This is a proposed ordinance, or is it good for the community and appropriate for the community to provide an opportunity or a public notice of a potentially historic building or structure, notification that it is going to be demolished, to have a period of review of alternatives to a demolition. And the review period is, can be several months, or it could be up to a year. And a lot of building projects take a while from getting the permit to actually having things. So in likelihood, it is time involved, but it is not a prohibition of demolition. So the delay is really for a period for alternatives from the city, the historical commission involved with it, to speak with the owner and kind of highlight perhaps some alternatives to removing a piece of Pittsburgh's heritage, a visual piece of Pittsburgh's heritage, to alternatives to perhaps being able to continue to maintain that particular heritage through other ways of recreating the use or the needs that this particular property owner has. So again, how we define that, and I mean, where were we kind of in the last iteration with Macris as a list? And there's also I think there was a paragraph in there saying, or if the building is considered historically significant by the commission, so there was maybe, in the current draft, I think there were two pieces to it. There was using the Macris list, which is for the public, that is previously inventory of building assets, historical building assets in our community and throughout the state of Massachusetts. It's the Massachusetts registry inventory system.
Through the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's through the Secretary of State's office that this database is created. And historical commissions before our time, Fitchburg historical commissions have been very active in creating this inventory of Fitchburg's assets that have been recorded in the Macris list. So one way of eligibility for being or perhaps having a demolition time period delay would be all buildings listed in the Macris list, which is not a complete list of all of our inventory buildings of historic quality, but a starting point. And one of our duties as a historical commission is to continue to update that survey in areas of the city that haven't been covered yet. And obviously some buildings become recognized for their historic qualities. It's been over 50 years ago that some of this inventory material was put in. Just about 50 years.
It's not, you can get it on the computer, can't you?
Yes.
Because I know I've done that, but I didn't
Yeah,
know.
and for the public, it is MACRIS.
May see.
So if you just type that into your search engine, you will probably find it.
MAC, what please?
MAC RIS, RIS.
.com.
I don't think it might be .org or,
Oh,
I think it's
Yeah,
a state, it's a
RIS.
state site, but just doing a Google search on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Or Massachusetts Macris, and it'll take you right to the site. There's also a site called Macris Maps. And if you put that in your search engine with MACRIS, MAPS, as two words, you'll find you can put in a street address and a community anywhere in Massachusetts, and it will show that, and it'll show if it's inventory. It'll show if it's part of a historic district. It'll show if it's an inventoried area in a particular city. Like Fitchburg has the Prospect Street area that has a general description of Prospect Street. It's not a historic district, it's just an inventory. And plus Prospect Street will have a lot of individual surveys of houses and other buildings in that particular area. Like the Crocker building that our guest was talking about at the Applewild School, I'm sure is in the inventory, along with lots of other buildings in the Prospect Street area. Most of downtown buildings are surveyed in Macris, and like the Highland Street area down below the university, that whole area is
Haven't happened.
probably over 100 mainly residential buildings that are individually oriented, inventory, plus there's the Highlands Street inventory area that kind of talks about the development of that.
Mhm.
That was a subdivision in Pittsburgh way back in the 19th century. That was open farmland, and all of those, Cedar Street, Highland Street, Myrtle Street, and Green, et cetera, and that was woodland or pasture land, and it was, as the industrial evolution took hold and more immigrants and workers moved into the city, kind of fueling the industry was here. It needed more housing for the workers, the foremen, the factory workers, the accountants, the families, the school buildings that end up in each one of these little neighborhoods also. There's a school building in the Hyde Street area. It's now a residential building. Sorry, long-winded, and we appreciate people who end up listening to this. Met some people out front that say the way goes on a long time.
Alan, you say you had something to say about,
Can't remember.
okay, and how does the Historical Society define historical? It's a big question.
Probably on their, like, mission statement. And then we have a mission statement, right, to preserve,
Yeah,
promote our historical city.
yeah, there is a historical statement. Yeah.
But it's tautological. Because the Historical Commission is told to look after the historical assets.
Yes. Very broad.
And things of historical value.
Yeah, society, it's a lot of stuff, a lot of things, like take the word photo. Yeah, versus the commission is the asset.
And the problem is that the notion of historically significant is dependent on the construct, the narrative construct, like H.M. Francis, historically significant because there's a narrative construct around H.M. Francis. If there is no narrative construct, then it becomes problematic because it may still be historical. But if there's no construct, it's like, as you were saying, the history of the indigenous people of North America, there was no history because there was no narrative, there was no construct for it.
Right.
But
I'm sure there was, but the indigenous people.
But it is there because there are sources.
Yeah.
There are historical sources available, but there was no construct.
Well, years ago, when I was driving, I did inventory of the city and picked out houses that looked, had, often they had ugly, siding added to them, but that looked like they were Victorian or, early American. My favorite house was at the bottom of South Street, I think two houses up. The music director for the city, Mr. Talcott, lived there. Do you remember him?
Yeah.
He was a wonderful fellow. And I just thought, I always wanted to go into the parks. And there's a few others. There's one on let's see, Second Street off of Water. Now, I haven't been by there for a long time, but if you go down the street, it's a white house. It's been there forever. And I hope it's still there. That's an old house, I'm sure. Railroad Street was settled. I used to know what the numbers were, but, that, a lot of the housing looks the same, looks the same, that was kind of developed. There's one very old house on the street that has all the, it looks like it's been there forever. But then a lot of little cottages were built. But are you familiar with going up, from the Putnam Street Bridge? If you take a right, you could either go to Forest Street or does Lawrence Street go up to Goldstone?
Yes.
Okay, so if you took the right and went to the top of Goldstone Street, you start seeing a whole series of buildings that are exactly the same, but all of the fronts of them have been changed, people have added Victoria kind of things. And they're not really well kept. But I keep thinking, what a startling, somehow you could get people interested in buying or living in those houses if they could fix them. I mean, you drive up there and then you'd see this wonderful series of buildings that somebody, and it's a couple on the left-hand side. I don't know.
That's before the cemetery.
No, you buy the cemetery,
By the cemetery,
by the cemetery,
Or
and
cemetery.
then you get to an intersection,
yes,
and you just take, you kind of bear to the right
okay,
to get to Rollstone.
yeah,
There's a school, is it the Water Street School?
Yeah, that's still there.
It's still there. There was a wonderful Rollstone Street School that got torn down. And I had, I think that the first floor of Rollstone, at least from my eyes, were the same height as the last floor of Wall Street School. And I always thought that's, what a developer could add a wing, not a wing, but a connection. And they could make, the city could close off that little street and then make the wonderful Parker Mall thing, Walton Street, part of the whole thing. Oh my God, it would be wonderful. Because that is never used. At one time, it had some tennis courts, and I remember going there with my girlfriends, but, I mean, it's just this lovely park, just sitting there.
On Walton Street, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there used to be a basketball court, but there were tennis courts there too.
They play baseball there?
Oh, I'm sure,
If I'm thinking of the right park, yeah.
yeah.
There's now the playground up on Holston Street.
Yeah.
There's a baseball field down below there.
Yeah, that's, the one on top is just for little kids, it
Yeah.
has the swing sets.
well, I just wanted people to know that I'm struggling with this, and I probably will continue to struggle with it.
Hard. It's hard, I mean,
Well, I feel that my understanding of historical is different from other people's understanding of historical, and I'm trying to figure out, well, what is your understanding of historical?
well, I always thought it was 100, at one point it was 100 years. And I don't know who told me that. Something's 100 years older. Now I'm almost 100. Dear God. I keep asking myself, what should I be doing at 88 and a half years old? Any suggestions?
Oral history
Down
project.
Down on the screen is the Historical Society's mission.
Oh, God.
To preserve, protect, and interpret the history of Fitchburg, Massachusetts.
And what is the history?
And what is it? Yeah, and it's all of it. And how do you
And what do you base the history on?
And somehow,
I'll have to ask a historian.
Base it on the evidence.
Yeah.
But if you destroy the evidence, then you don't have a history.
Right. And, yeah,
I think you're right when you talk about, yesterday was history. And that, well, we're archiving stuff with the society that's, say, the mayor's inauguration. Mayor's quality, that's history now. So it's something that needs to be archived from society. So,
Right, so that's not 50 years old.
so there you go, that's something history.
Yeah.
That's an example.
This is
Yeah,
to be
so-
continued.
yeah, so it's, some point we'll have to define what we think is best for the city, for Pittsburgh, as a proposal for a demolition delay that we think is appropriate for our city and how to select those. How to select the eligibility for it, I guess. Yeah, in the end, it could be all demolition permits.
Well, I'm concerned that all of Pittsburgh will wind up like the empty lot at Johnson, with Johnson, who was.
Oh, please, that's
No.
awful.
And does a property owner really have a right to demolish the building or property?
Yes, they do.
Don't they have to get permission from the city?
They have to go to the building department. I don't know.
They need to get a permit,
I mean,
So that's.
because there's public,
Yeah. I don't know if there's a hearing.
welfare involved with, debris. What are you gonna do with the stuff? You gonna leave a big hole underground, or so there's some public safety issues. that
So if the,
Building permits,
if the city doesn't issue the permit, can they still demolish the building?
then they've broken the law.
So they don't have a right to break the law.
No, I think it's a process. You have to get, you have to, you have to connect with the building department and let them know what you're going to be doing.
If you construct something, certain parameters of what's constructing something is, but you have to have a building permit.
So if a homeowner applies for a building permit, does the city have the right not to grant them the permit?
It has to follow, it has to follow zoning, which means the building has to be, it may have setbacks on the property. They have to own the property. The city has developed a zoning bylaw that covers the whole city, and within the zoning bylaw, there are regulations on the size of the building, the placement of the building, depending on whether it has city utilities such as water or sewer. And that kind of defines how big the lot might have to be. If you have to have your own well or septic system, means your property more than likely has to be a minimal size so that your water supply is a certain distance away from your septic, on-site septic use. Also, the city has, their zoning can have things like, I can't have a slaughterhouse next to an elementary school. Or a liquor store next to an elementary school, or maybe a marijuana dispensary next to certain types of uses. So the zoning covers things of building use and kind of property size. And mainly that if you do something on this property, you're not adversely affecting somebody else next door or elsewhere in the city. So they've set up the zoning board, and the zoning planning board is created over the many, many years. There used to be no zoning law, but because of concentration of things, there had to be zoning requirements, and there had to be, same time, Chicago fire, these were all wooden buildings that were built right next to each other, or other great fires in the cities. And because the buildings were so close together, you know, one burns, they all burn because they're all made out of combustible materials. So building codes were set up, well, you have to have one or two means of egress, you can't block the doorways. If you're building right next to each other, you have to have an incombustible fire separation. So these become building code regulations. So I can't build a building until I meet the zoning requirements for that particular area of the city that has a lot to do with utilities and sometimes business and separating residential and business, which is kind of going out of vogue because we're realizing that mixed communities are sometimes better than the others, or certain ways. Like we're trying to do downtown here, have both residential, urban types of spaces as an alternative to just business that closes down at 5 o'clock or isn't there anymore. So you have to get a building permit and it has to meet the zoning requirements and the building code requirements.
So just as one doesn't have a right to construct a building without a permit, one doesn't have a right to demolish a building.
That's correct. So the demolition delays in other Massachusetts communities are used, have that as when one files for a demolition permit, the building commissioner and the building department will screen that particular application to see if it falls within a demolition or historic preservation act for that particular community to allow just a delay, not a denial of the permit. So as long as the other demolition things are met, such as, filling in the hole and, not putting asbestos in the air all over the place and safety and proper disposal of the material, and not dumping it over the Ashburn and Street Hill over there, over the fence or something, so proper disposal. Basically, public health and welfare is, how you can demolish a building, but you have the right to do it. There are just certain things you have, requirements that you have to meet, and adding a delay period is just adding to those regulatory requirements.
Yeah, one of the things I like about the Springfield demolition delay process is they don't assume that it's the burden of the historical commission or the city to prove that a building is of historical significance. They have a form whereby the person owning the building seeks a waiver from the building. Not that it's not historically significant, but that other considerations come. For example, that gymnasium on Applewild is historically significant. It's part of the history of Applewild, part of the history of the neighborhood. But other considerations, the safety of the students, overrides whatever presumed historical value it has as being part of the history of Fitchburg. So and that is what led me to the writing of this about historical, that the Dunkin' Donuts, is that historical? Well, yes, it is. It's part of the history of Fitchburg. But if they want to tear it down, I don't think there's too much lost.
No,
In terms of
What
the heritage, but it is part of the heritage.
you and I and Ellen kind of remember the first McDonald's that we saw back in 1959 or something like that, or 56. maybe you did too, Andy. But it really was the arch and it was just a walk-up window and you could get a hamburger for a quarter.
on
or
Water
something
Street.
like it. And, you know, if, let's say we had one of those Dunkin' Donuts, excuse me, the original McDonald's where the Dunkin' Donuts is, let's say. And now it is a historical structure.
Right,
And would we be remiss to not try to persuade them not to tear the building down because of it was an original McDonald's. Now, just like Dunkin' Donuts, the franchise has had 100 different styles that they've gone through. It's now called Dunkin', it's not called Dunkin' Donuts, and you know, it's
well, you know, the parallel that I keep thinking, of, maybe this is way offline, is the extinction of certain species of animals like passenger pigeon and northern curlew. There used to be millions, tens of millions of darkening the sky. It would take, you know, there'd be a mile-long flocks of these, and within a matter of a few decades, they were totally like that.
This is, I didn't think of it this way, but, I used to be able to look out, you know, and see lots of them.
Yeah.
You know, the sky would be almost filled.
Yeah.
And I don't see them anymore.
No. And that's, you know, wouldn't it have been nice if someone had the foresight to preserve that original McDonald's here?
there probably are a couple of them throughout the country that are close to the original
I
ones.
can't remember what it looked like.
Probably,
I think that's what they said.
they had a
about
big
the
slopey
passenger
roof up and
pigeons.
they had the two arches and ended a thing like this, that, you
You
know,
know, I think people think that, oh, well, there must be someplace else.
yeah, it becomes it is a subjective call. And somebody has to make it. If indeed we think it's important to have this delay for reconsideration for a certain
That's right.
category of reviewing the heritage value of a particular,
Right.
and it's not a denial. It's not, in this case, it's not a denial that you can't tear it down. It is just a delay period that allows the commission and others in the community to recommend alternatives. Or it could be that, you know, there could be somebody that goes to this person that's proposing and said, I will buy this for the value of your property or plus a certain percentage or something like that. And that becomes fine with, you know, the new buyer and the previous owner. And the building becomes perhaps safe and is not demolished. Or if that doesn't happen and no other alternatives can be found or additional, you know, instead of tearing it down, if you preserve, you know, 2/3 of this building and did an addition for additional apartments off the back of it, you would retain this neighborhood visual quality to it, and you would still be able to have through, you know, through a variance through zoning that the historical commission would help back, would be to, you know, this alternative way of doing it. And, you know, it becomes a win-win for historic preservation, and it becomes a win for the property owner. It's really just a delay period, and it becomes the responsibility, our responsibility, and the rest of the cities during this period to brainstorm and think of alternatives to what if you did this and what if you did that. It's just a thinking period. And then the building can, you still can carry through your allowed demolition, it's just a building period. You're right still to do it,
Yeah.
and it's not,
Well,
in the long, in the whole picture,
You just explained this matter, right? Because they have to meet certain requirements. They can't just go out and demolish the building.
yeah, they've applied for a demolition permit. And that's what would trigger, if it meets a certain category that we're trying to prescribe, then it would go into the demolition period. And there are exceptions if the public safety of the building, it's harming public health and safety, it can be demolished immediately through proclamation of the building commission. Other pieces that we could review it and say, no, even though it meets our criteria for being eligible for the delay period, we would say, no, this particular building does not. And we'd say, go ahead. We have no reason why this, why a delay period would be beneficial for you.
You should probably.
Wrap it up. Yeah.
Sorry.
So they're great questions, and we've been pushing this around for a long time.
Discussions.
Number 9, nothing new on the rail trail signs. I'm gonna try to work on that in the summer. Historic marker update, no new marker applications.
Oh, I know, I wanted to ask you, how much are the markers? Do you have an idea of how much they are?
They are 100 and just about $160 each.
Okay,
It's 157.25 or something.
and there's someone who does it now.
They're actually being done through Was Arthur.
Oh, that's right,
Yeah.
okay.
The application form for historic markers on the Fitchburg Historical Commission website, so if you.
Okay, I'll look it up.
If you Google Fitchburg Historical Commission, it'll take you to our website, and the application form is near the end of our website.
Okay.
Commission membership vacancies update. We're still waiting for perhaps a resume from Chris in one consideration. And still have one other vacancy.
Yeah, he's in.
Yeah.
He's just been very busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you could speak with him, Don. Website additions, things we talked about earlier, reservation briefs, National Park Service, how to restore all kinds of different parts of your building. The reservation directory, I've actually put a link in here, which is a Preservation in Massachusetts link. That takes you right to the directory and how to contact all the various categories of preservation people, and how to contact those individual companies and individuals. New business, we talked about the Armory and the Rock Walk, and any other new business.
I just wanted to say that I think you're doing a great job, fantastic job as the chair of the historical commission, really getting things done. I'm very, very appreciative.
Me too.
Thank you. We are still moving slowly, and hopefully we're making some headway on this.
Plus Stephanie ensures that I get here.
Yes.
Better thumb out and stop.
On that preservationmass.org link, I looked up there, and the city of Leominster has been recognized for restoring one of their old brick houses or building. It's at 41 Summer Street, Leominster, near Carter.
Cool.
Oh,
Beautiful brick building with like old woodwork porch kind of from the doing it.
The
Nice.
city has been,
Leominster has been awarded some award on this website.
Oh, reservation maps, yeah.
Yeah.
We,
Pittsburgh, they
Well-
page out of their book.
early on in our current historical commission, we nominated, when City Hall was closed down,
Yeah,
we nominated as one of the
endangered.
endangered species in Massachusetts, or the most, endangered list. We got on the 10 or 11 most endangered buildings list of Preservation Massachusetts. And maybe that had a little influence on,
Well, I mean,
people reconsidering demolishing this building.
well, I can tell you at the time, City Hall moved out to the old General Electric Putnam Place. And the mayor at the time, Lisa Horn, and I forget, she came to my house one day and she said, you can stay there. She said, it works out fine, and it's, the GE property is getting used and all that stuff. He said, no, you can't. You cannot. Why? It's building. I said, you can't do that. It would be a disaster if the city itself left the building. I said, and I would just suggest to you, you don't have to agree with me, but, and I told her at the time that the buildings the city had closed and where they were,
Right.
well,
You know what happened.
yeah.
Right.
And they still sit there.
Well, Lisa had a connection with Putnam Place anyway, so. That may be part of why she was so
Oh,
hiding.
I don't know. She, I don't know if I don't know that. She was there. I mean, they were tenants.
Any new business? No?
That's it.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
So, second, third.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you all for being here and FATV for recording this. Hopefully next month.